Good morning, afternoon, or night, Austin High. We are on page 15, factoring by the GCF. This for the state of Texas states A10D, rewrite a polynomial expression of degree 1 and degree 2 in equivalent forms using the distributive property. So the example is today, you're going to be writing the answer in this form, 6x times x minus 4. We would have to use the distributive property to simplify this, right? So the distributive property would be 6x times x is 6x squared, and 6x times negative 4 would be negative 24x. So basically, we're going to be given the answer, and we got to bring it back to the original distribution problem, okay? So far, so I'm reading right here, so far we have learned to go from this, where we are given two binomials, we are told to multiply. Once we multiply, remember, using FOIL or box method, we get the simplified answer, x squared plus x minus 12, right? Because we had to combine like terms, and then we get three terms. Factoring, which is our topic of today, factoring is the reverse of this process. I write above that. It's like tying a shoe and untying it. Okay, what's the easy part? Well, untying your shoe is easy. That's called multiplication. Well, the part that's a little more challenging, takes you a little more time to learn how to do, is tying a shoe. That's like factoring. Okay, so maybe you can understand that tying a shoe is like factoring. Untying a shoe is like multiplying. So let's see what this looks like. We're going to look at our identifying the greatest common factor, the definition in the process, okay? So I am right here in our notes. I'm just going to read this little box. The greatest common factor, called the GCF, is the greatest number that divides two numbers. To find the GCF of two or more numbers, here we go. Step 1, list the factors. I'm going to show you how to figure that out. Step 2, multiply those factors both numbers have in common. If there are no common factors, the GCF is 1. So let's take a look at what that means. The greatest common factor of 12 and 16. So now I am right here. The 3 bullet points say, find the factors of each number, circle the common factors, choose the greatest of those common factors. So take a look. The factors of 12 are 1 times 12 is 12, 2 times 6 is 12, 3 times 4 is 12. Those are all the ways to make 12. For 16, 1 times 16 is 16. 2 times 8 is 16. And 4 times 4 is 16. These are the factors. What multiplies to 12? What multiplies to 16? All right, so that's bullet point 1. Bullet point 2 says circle the ones they have in common. Okay, they have a 1 in common. They have a 2 in common, and they have a 4 in common. That's why they have those arrows. Now, which of these is the greatest? 1, 2, or 4? Yes, 4 is the biggest number that they both have in common. So that's the key. They have to have it in common. So they didn't have a 16 in common. They didn't have a 12 in common. They didn't have a 6, and that one didn't have an 8. Okay, so the greatest one they did have in common was 4. And that's how we find the greatest common factor. Some of you might be saying, Coach, I don't know the multiplication table. I'm a little worried that I won't be able to list out all of the factors, Coach. I'm going to show you a nifty trick on Desmos that will allow you to write down all the factors without having to think too hard. Yay, Coach Hughes. Okay, so we're going to demonstrate that by finding the GCF of these 4 sets of numbers. So 9 and 12. If I didn't know what multiplies to make 9, I would come over here to Desmos and I would type 9 divided by X. Coach, why are you dividing it by X? Just trust me, it's going to work. So I'm going to click the little gear and I'm going to change everything to a table because a table breaks up. This times this makes 9. Okay. So check it out. We're only going to work with positive numbers because 9 is a positive number. So we don't care about any of that. So start carrying the first 2 numbers that don't have decimals. 1 times 9. Oops, here's a decimal. That's not 1. 3 times 3. Oh, that has a decimal. That's not 1. So these are the only 2 factors that multiply to make 9. So now we go back over here and we copy that down. I like to do my factors in order. 1 times 9, 3 times 3. So now let's do 12. Same kind of thing, guys. 12 divided by X. Go to the gear and hit that. 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now we exclude all of the negatives and the 0. We only look at positives. Okay, 1 times 12 are 2 factors. 2 times 6, 3 times 4. Up 4 and 3 repeat, so we don't need that. Here's a decimal, we don't need that. So the factors are all kind of close together, ironically, for 12. Now we can go back and we can copy that down. 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. We're going to circle the common factors. The common factors would be 1. Remember, common means what they share. They share a 1. They share a 3. And that's it. So the greatest is 3 because it's bigger than 1. That's how you find the GCF. Let's move on to B. Well, remember that 6 is 1 times 6 or 2 times 3. Now, 18, you can go back to Desmos and type in 18 divided by X, click the gear, and change to a table. Okay? For the sake of time, I'm just going to write them down. But remember, when you're working this out for homework and on test and on the star, you're going to take the time to do 18 divided by X because you need to find the answer to the GCF. 1 times 18. I like to go in order, so I always start with 1 times the number that they gave me. Now, 18 is an even number, so I know it's 2 times something. It's 2 times 9. All right. Can 3 divide into 18? Yes, 3 times 6. Can 4 go into 18? No. Can 5 go into 18? No, because this number doesn't end in a 0 or a 5. Okay, can 6? Oh, I already listed 6. So once I go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I've already got a 6 on my list, I know that I've met all of the choices. Okay, now which ones do they have in common? They're always going to have a 1 in common, I'm just saying. They each have a 2 in common. They each have a 3 in common. They each have a 6 in common. So the greatest number that they have in common is 6. That's right. Okay, 15, 30, and 105. Okay, start with 15. 1 times 15. 2 times nothing. 3 times 5. So there's only 4 numbers that multiply together to make 15. Now let's do 30. 1 times 30. 2 times 15. 3 times 10. 4 times nothing. 5 times 6. 7 times nothing. 8 times nothing. 9 times nothing. 10 times 3. So since I already have a 10 listed in purple, then I know that's it. Okay, now let's move to 105, and I'm going to go back to Desmos and type in 105 divided by x. Okay, remember how we do this? We can cross out all of the negatives and the 0 choices. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I think I've got them all. So 1 times 105, 2 has a decimal, 4 times a decimal, 8 times a decimal, 6 times a decimal, 9 times a decimal, 10 times a decimal. So the only ones remaining is 1 times 105, 3 times 35. So let me write that. 1 times 105, 3 times 35, 5 times 21, 7 times 15. And that's it. Okay, now we're going to circle our common factors. They each have a 1. That's not the highest. It looks like they each have a 3. They each have a 5. And oh, they each have a 15. If they each have a 15, that's bigger than any other number that I already have circled. So the greatest common factor is, why is that not writing? That's so bizarre. Huh. Okay. We'll have to write it on the side then. Weird how it let me write it on the other ones. Okay, now let's get to the more algebra example. Okay, let's multiply. What numbers multiply to make 7? Well, 7's prime. Prime means 1 times 7 are the only 2 numbers that ever multiply to 7. 1 times 7. Now remember, x squared is x times x. Makes x squared. Now 42 is 1 times 42, 2 times 21, 3 times, what's 42 divided by 3? 14. No 4, no 5. Oh, and 6 times 7. And we can't forget the x, so we put an x. So now we have to circle what they have in common. Looks like they have a number 7 in common, and it looks like they have an x in common. So remember, you circle what they have in common. If this one only has 1 x and that one has 2, then the most that they have in common is 1. So the GCF is 7x. Okay, now take a minute and let that sink in. If you need to hit rewind to truly understand it, please do that. Let's move on to applying this to our algebra expressions. It says finding the GCF allows us to go from 4x squared plus 12x to, like our state of Texas TEAC said, 4x times x plus 3. We call 4x times x plus 3 factored form. Okay, so this is called factored form. This is simplified. This is simplified form. This is factored form. Today, our objective is to factor the simplified form back to what it used to be. Okay, so here are the steps. Determine the GCF of the algebraic terms in your polynomial. So again, we have to do everything we just did. Factor out the GCF by dividing each term by the GCF. It's not as hard as it sounds. Write your answer in the final form of put the GCF on the outside of the parenthesis, put what's left over from the first term first, put what's left over from the second term second. Sounds logical to me. Use the distributive property or the box method to check your answers. I'm also going to say Desmos. Desmos checks your answers as well. Okay, so we're going to do everything we just did. The only difference is I snuck a minus sign or a plus sign in between them, whereas above, you'll notice it just says this and that. So we took out the and we just put a minus or a plus. Then it's going to be so relatable. Okay, so over here, I'm going to do the 16x squared factors here. 1 times 16, 2 times 8, no 3, and 4 times 4. What makes x squared x and x? On the other side, I have a 12. 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4, x. Circle the greatest number that they have in common. So the greatest number that they each have would be a 4, and the greatest number of x's that they each have, they have to each have that amount. Well, this one only has 1. So the greatest that this one has is 1, this one has 2, but that one doesn't. So we have to just say x is the GCF. So notice what it says. Write your answer in this final form. The GCF goes first. Okay, GCF is 4 and x. Then put a parenthesis. Then, I'm going to erase that part right there, guys. We're going to divide by 4x. Step 2 says factor it out by dividing. So once you know your GCF, divide all the terms by the 4 and the x. And now do 4th grade math and 9th grade math. 4th grade math is what's 16 divided by 4. 4th grade math would say 4. 9th grade math, when I divide x's, I subtract exponents. 2 minus 1 is 1. Well, duh, there was 1 that we didn't circle. So that has to go back in the problem. Now bring down the minus sign. 4th grade math is 12 divided by 4 is 3. 9th grade math is 1 minus 1 is 0, and anything to the 0 is 1, and 1 times 3 is 3. Or you could just do this, coach, these cross out. If there's an x on the top, dividing by an x on the bottom, they cross out to 1. It's invisible, it goes away. Now, did we get our answer in factored form? We sure did. Now, step 4 says check it. Either multiply it back together using the box method or distributive property. I'm just going to use Desmos. 16x squared minus 12x. So I'm going to type in the problem. 16x squared minus 12x. Type in the problem, question, type in your answer. 4x times x times 4x minus 3. Notice my red and my black match the graphs. That means that these are equivalent. Equivalent. I can't even spell equivalent, but you know what I mean? Okay. Thanks for sparing me. Okay, now we have 3 more examples and we're done. the example says to factor the GCF and factor the polynomial. Okay, factor the polynomial. What do they have in common? Divide by the GCF, write it as a parenthesis with the GCF on the outside. It's not as complicated as it feels. You're going to get the hang of it really quick. So what multiplies to make it 8x squared? I'm going to do it over here on the side. 1 times 8, 2 times 4, and x, because x squared means there's going to be an x and an x. Now, the other 24, 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6, and that's it. And x. Circle the GCF. What's the greatest number that they share? Well, this one's greatest is an 8, and this one has an 8, so the GCF is 8. This one only has 1x, so I can only circle 1x from both. Now, we're going to write the GCF on the outside of our parenthesis, and then we just divide by the GCF and write the answers back into the parenthesis. So 4th grade math, 8 divided by 8 is 1. 9th grade math, x squared divided by x, we do 2 minus 1 is 1, so x to the 1, but we don't have to write the 1. Plus 24 divided by 8 is 3, and x divided by x is 1, and 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, same number on top, same number on the bottom, you can divide and you're done. Same letter on top, same letter on the bottom, you can divide and you're done. Okay, that's our answer. How do we check it? We type it in the Desmos. Okay, on B, write down your factors of 12x squared. Okay, 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4, x times x. On the other side, write down your factors of 20. 1 times 20, 2 times 10. There is no 3, 4 times 5, and an x. Now, circle the greatest number that they have in common. The greatest number that they share is a 4, and this one only has 1x, so I can only circle 1x from the red side. So the greatest common factor is 4x. So I write the greatest common factor, I get my parentheses set up, and then I divide by 4x, and then I do my math. 12 divided by 4 is 3, 2 minus 1 is 1, 20 divided by 4 is 5, x divided by x crosses out. Final answer. And our final question is 12x to the 5th plus 16x squared. What's the GCF? Factor this problem. Factoring means I need a parenthesis in my answer. What did it look like before it got to this answer? So let's go ahead and do our 12x to the 5th. So 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because there's x to the 5th. And then our other term is 1 times 16, 2 times 8. There is not a 3. 4 times 4, x times x. Okay. Now, divide or find the GCF. So the greatest number that they share is 4, right? Because this one doesn't have an 8. This one doesn't have a 12, this one doesn't have a 16. So yeah, 4 is the greatest number that they have in common. And this one only has 2. So I can only circle 2 from that one. So the greatest common factor is a 4 with an x and an x. So I could call that 4x squared. We want to simplify x and x to x squared, add exponents. Okay, so 4x squared. And then what's going back inside? So I'm going to divide by 4x squared, and I'm going to divide by 4x squared. All right, 4th grade math, 12 divided by 4 is 3. 9th grade math, 5 minus 2 is 3, x cubed. And remember, guys, I had 3 x's remaining. That's where those 3 x's go. Okay, 4th grade math, 16 divided by 4 is 4. X squared divided by x squared is 1. You could do it 9th grade math where you get 2 minus 2 is 0 and anything to the 0 is 1 and 1 times 4 is 4. That just feels like a long process. And that's your final answer. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.